Hello artists, welcome to your harvest painting class. In front of you should have your canvas, long ways like so, a cup of water, a big brush, a small brush, a paper towel. I do recommend a pencil for later on when we write harvest over our pumpkins. For your colors, you should have orange, brown, yellow, your darker blue, your lighter blue, and your white and black. I also do recommend a plate for mixing later. You don't have to pour out your colors, but I definitely recommend a plate for mixing gray here in just a bit. If you do not have all those materials, not a problem. Go ahead and push pause on the video and come back to us whenever you're ready. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We are gonna dip both of our brushes in our cup of water and swirl them nice and round. And once we're done, we're just gonna gently pat our brushes on our paper towel like so. The first thing we're gonna do for our harvest painting is paint our fence in the background. And our fence is a dark gray, definitely darker than a pencil lead gray. So go ahead and grab your big brush. And I want you to grab 1, 2, 3, 4 scoops of your white with your big brush. And 1, 2 scoops of your black. So 4-to-2 ratio, and mix with your big brush. So it's definitely a darker gray. If you feel like your gray needs to be lighter, add more white. If you feel like your gray needs to be darker, add more black. A nice dark gray. Perfect. Once you're done grabbing your nice dark gray, just wipe off the sides of your big brush. You don't want any big chunks on there. There are 3 palettes, 1, 2, 3 for your fence. You're gonna take your big brush and that dark gray you have in there, and you are gonna create those 3 palettes like so. So I'm gonna kind of mark where I think my 3 palettes would be, and I could even mark on the bottom where they line up. So 1, 2, 3, be sure it's pretty even. 1, 2, 3. And all I did was just make 2 dots and then 2 dots down here. Perfect. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Later on we'll go in there and kind of tweak it a little bit. But once you're done with your 1, 2, 3, 4 dots, and again be sure these are pretty even on either side, I'm going to take my big brush and I'm just going to sweep here and there. It doesn't have to be a perfect solid line. I do want to go over my dots so I don't see them. I'll do the same thing with this top one. I'm going to come down sweeping, which I'm just kind of flicking with my brush. And it doesn't have to be all the way covered from top to bottom, but I want to keep that brush moving and connect from one side to the next. So I have my 3 palettes. 1, 2, 3, pretty even. Doesn't have to be perfect. Fill this one that way. Once you're done creating those 2 lines, you can go back to your gray paint that you've mixed before and just randomly add sweeps coming down, maybe 5 to 8 sweeps coming down in each section of your 3 palettes. And all I'm doing is just sweeping down like the number 1, anywhere from 5 to 8 lines. Ooh, maybe I did 9, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ooh, 5 to 9 lines kind of going in there. And you still want to see those main lines visible though. You don't want to cover them up. But once you do those sweeps in each section, before it dries, you don't have to clean your brush, but I want you to go into your white paint, and then I want you to go over the sweeps a little bit with white. And I also want you to slowly cover up all that white space as well. So go over your sweeps that you did with white, and I'm just making short choppy movements with my brush, moving it around. I do want to completely cover this first palette right here. And I do want to go over my gray line just a little bit here and there. I still want to see it, but I don't want it to be too solid. Once I was done with that, so again, short choppy lines covering up all the white space, I went over my sweeps. I'm going to add water to my brush, tap it on the paper towel, and then I'm going to kind of smooth it out from top to bottom. So before it dries, I'm going to add water to my brush and smooth it out. And if you feel like it's too dark, let it dry and add a little bit of white to it. If you feel like it's too light, you can let it dry for a little bit and add more gray to it. So there's my first palette. I'll go in there and add a little bit more on top a little bit later. Same with the second one. You don't have to wash or dry your brush. I want you to go into your white paint with your big brush again. Be sure you're not completely covering up the two lines that we have, but you want to go over it with short choppy lines, filling up that whole middle space. And then once you're done, you can go ahead and add water to your brush and smooth it out. You do want your grays to be pretty similar, so if you need it to be darker, like the first one, then you can go back and add more gray, because the gray is probably dried a little bit by now and it might not be working, might not be blending as much as the first section. So I'm not going to even clean my brush. Once I'm done adding white, I'll add a little bit of gray to make sure it's pretty similar to the first one. Short choppy movements with my brush. Don't get rid of the two lines. You still want to see where your palettes separate. And then once they're kind of this similar color, I can go in there and add water on top of my brush. Make nice smooth lines. All right, so I have a good amount of gray on there. I'll add water to my brush, tap, tap, tap. Now I'm gonna go from top to bottom and smooth it out. And again, I can go back to more gray if I need to, if I feel like it's not similar, back to more white if I feel like I need to lighten it up. And I do see I have some gray sweepy lines in here, so I'm going to go in my second area. I'm just going to add some gray sweepy lines because I want to still see some sweeps in there too. I don't want to completely get rid of them, so I can just go back, add a little bit of gray lines and go over it again. Getting pretty close to my other palette. There we go, and get it nice and smooth. So they're pretty similar, not exact, but pretty similar. So I have my second palette. Same thing with my third one. I don't have to wash my brush, or I can just dip it into the white paint. I want to go over my grays and completely cover up this third palette. Short choppy movements with my brush. Don't get rid of this line completely. You still want to see it so you can see the separation of your palettes. And once I'm done adding white, I can add water to my brush and smooth it out with long lines, and I can go back and add more gray and white as I need to lighten and darken it. This is definitely a little bit lighter than the other two, so in just a moment I'll add more gray. So short chopping movements. Before I add water, I'm gonna go in there and, without cleaning my brush, add some sweeps of gray in there to make it a little bit darker. Then I can add water to my brush. Make sure there's not too much on there. Nice long brush strokes from top to bottom. So the same thing for all 3 palettes. You had your 5 to 9 sweeps of gray, working up and down, adding white to the whole thing, adding water to smooth it out from top to bottom, making sure the 3 are pretty even. You don't want one to be way lighter. I think I'm going to make this one a little bit darker with more gray sweeps in there. As my gray dried, as I moved along, it got lighter and lighter and lighter, and it wasn't blending in with the white as much. In a moment here, I will paint the 4 sides of my canvas. So 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, just because I like a complete canvas on this one. I don't want the sides to be white. Add a little bit more gray, so it's a little bit darker. I think I'm gonna let this one dry a little bit more so it doesn't blend in with my white, and I can go back and add a little bit more gray so it sits on top of the white a little bit more and makes it a little bit more darker. All right, so I have my 3 gray palettes. I'm gonna start painting on the 4 sides. I'm just gonna use the gray on my brush. I always go back for more gray and white. So you just want kind of like that medium gray you have on the rest of the palettes. No need to really worry about adding white at this point on top. So you just want a nice gray, similar to your 3 palettes on your brush. So you can go back to your gray and your white on your brush at the same time and just fill up those 4 sides. So by the end of this, you want nice long movements with your brush on all 4 sides. Your palettes to look pretty similar in the gray. Left side, right side. It's okay if I still have some of that gray poking through. And then on the bottom part, I'm just going to move my brush up and down like so. Get out all the bumps. You want it to be nice and smooth or it'll take forever to dry. So the left side, the right side, and the bottom, you want to completely cover up your canvas with the grays. Don't worry about bringing your 2 darker palette grays up top and on bottom, not a problem. So don't worry about bringing this line work over. We're just going to keep it at those 2 lines on the front of our canvas. Go back and touch some of the white up that I see. And I'll go back to more of my gray. Now that's a little bit more dry. Add some on top. Make it a little bit darker. Add water, tap my paper towel. More gray on top. Still looks pretty wet and shiny. So it's still wet. Perfect. All right. Take your time with this. Again, you want to make sure you've covered your palette with grays and you can still see those two lines. Cover up as much as that white as you can. Go back and touch it up. No rush at all. So you want a nice clean background. The next thing I'm going to do, again, you can push pause on the video if you're still working on this part, no rush at all. I'm going to wipe my big brush on my paper towel. I'm going to dip it in water. So first I dried and then I washed. Make sure it's not dripping on there. You can always pat it on the side of your cup. I'm going to go in there and add some white on my brush, and I'm going to sweep some white on top, and then I'll go in there and I'll sweep some darker gray on top. So there's a little bit of white, and I'm just going in there and adding some sweeps of white in all three sections. And I'm going to add a little bit of water before I move on. So sweeps of white, again, maybe 5 to 9. I think that's our magic numbers. And it's just at the front side between on each of the 3 palettes. And then I'm just going to sweep my brush on top of this white so I get some lighter areas. I'm working on that base gray that we just built. So white, 5 to 9 lines, add water, and sweep it up and down. This one's still a little bit wet, so you can kind of see that it's shiny. You might want to give that one a little bit more drying time. So I just have some sweeps, and I'm constantly moving my brush. I don't want my paintbrush to be going in the same spot. I'm sweeping. You can even start from the bottom and work your way up. You can go back to more gray if you need to, if you feel like it got a little bit too light. But we'll be adding a dark gray on top, and we'll be using that dark gray to kind of get some of our palette back and to kind of roughen up the sides as well. So I added some sweeps of white, went over it with water, over that base gray that we made. We're just kind of building light and dark on top. Sweeps of lines. Perfect. All right. What I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give my canvas a couple minutes to dry before I move on to this next step, because I feel like the right side is still a little bit too wet for my next step. So I'll push pause, but if your canvas is nice and dry and not shiny, you can move on to the next step. If it's still a little bit shiny, give it a couple minutes to dry and join me for the dark gray in just a moment. All right, now that my gray and white is a little bit more dry, I'm gonna go in there and make a darker gray to kind of sweep on top and around the edges. I don't even have to clean my brush, so if you want to leave your big brush as is, not a problem. And at this point, if you want to make your background lighter, you can add more white. It's up to you. I'm going to just start building some gray on top, a darker gray on top. So I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 scoops of white, and then 1, 2 scoops of black. So 3 scoops of white, 1 scoop of black is my recipe. So it's pretty similar to the other one that I just made. You can just build it on top, but you definitely want it to be darker than the gray that you have right now. So I'm going to take my 3-to-1 recipe of that gray that I made, And I'm going to wipe off the sides because it looks like I have big chunks of paint after I mix. I'm gonna go over those 2 lines that I made earlier to separate my palettes, but instead of making a long line, I'm just gonna sweep on top, here and there, so I can see them a little bit better. So I'm just gonna sweep here and there. I'm also gonna go back and sweep the edges. So gray, I'm gonna tap some off on my paper towel so I don't have too much. So I just kind of swept here and there. It looks rustic and worn, so it shouldn't be a perfect straight line. But off the top, I'm just gonna sweep down here and there with my darker gray. And some lengths come a little bit lower, some are a little bit higher. Gray, tap it on your paper towel a little bit, and then start off on the edges, coming down here and there at different lengths. I'll do the same thing on the bottom, but I'm gonna work my way up from the edge. So I'm gonna start here and I'm gonna sweep up some shorter areas. I'm just kind of sweeping some longer ones. I can go up a little bit higher. It has that worn look. Again, you do want this gray to be darker than your background. So if you need to add a little bit black to it, so it is darker, you can. If you need it a little bit lighter, add white. Perfect. On the edges, I am gonna also add some on the left and on the right, but I'm not gonna come in. I'm just gonna do just some sweeps right off the edge here and right off the edge there, so they're not coming towards the canvas. So I came down with sweeps, just kind of flicking my brush. I came up with sweeps, flicking with my brush, and then the left side and the right side, and of course don't forget your 2 lines that you made earlier, which is some sweeps coming down. Once you're done with that, you can go in there and add some sweeps inside each palette. You can just kind of go in there and just add a little bit here and there. If you ever feel like you need to soften up some of the line work, you can always add water to your brush and soften up those lines. Again, you can do 5 to 9 in each one. You can add water, tap, tap, tap. Once you're done, just kind of go over them. That'll smooth it out a little bit too. So if you feel like those look a little bit too rough, just add water to them. If you feel like your background got too dark, don't be afraid to go back and add white to your brush, tap it, and just kind of go in there with some white. And then you can add water to on top of your white and make that work. So go back and forth as you need with your gray and your white, and make sure you have a nice background with some sweeps, and be sure you don't lose your 2 lines that separate each palette. Remember, you're building your pumpkins on top, so how dark or light would you like your gray? Going back and forth. Maybe going back to my gray. Just kind of going back and forth and messing with it, making sure I can see my 3 palettes. I have some dark and light working with each other. I use my water for my gray to smooth out, for my white to smooth out if I wanted to get a little bit lighter. If you wanted to add some knots in your fence, I'll show you how in just a moment. Let me get this kind of figured out. But I'm just kind of moving along from one to the next because I am wanting those colors to be wet and working together. But I'll show you how to make knots in the wood if you want to add some. So I have 1, 2, 3 palettes. Gone in there and added as much gray and white as I'd like. Smooth out. Smooth out those lines just a little bit with some water. And now I'm going to show you how to build those knots in the wood. And I would first watch and see if you like it. Maybe do a practice run on your paper towel so you get like a good feel for it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my, let's jump to our smaller brush just in case. Be sure it's nice and clean. I'm going to go back to that gray that I just mixed and find up the palette that I want to build my knot on. Remember, you're going to have your 2 pumpkins sitting right here. So maybe some that are a little bit higher, and you can add as many as you want, but it's pretty much a C shape. Make sure I get it dark enough to where you can see it. It's like a parentheses shape on the left side. Maybe come down a little bit lower, make that kind of backward C, the right side parentheses shape, and then you can go in there and make a bigger one on the left side, maybe come down a little bit and make one on the right side. Might be kind of hard to see until it dries a little bit more and darkens up. So I have this shape, a bigger, longer parentheses, and that shape right there. A little bit darker so you can see it. So that shape, that shape, that shape, and that shape. I'll make another one so you can see here. Again, I'm kind of making sure they're still visible once I lay my pumpkins on top. So I have one on this palette. I'll go in there and make the left side of the parentheses a little bit longer, right? Kind of come in there and make a bigger one. Like so. So left, come down a little bit lower, and I can make a parentheses on the left side, maybe one on the right side. These ones can be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but you want to kind of keep them all together. If you don't like it while it's wet, you can add water to it to keep it moving and keep it blended. But it does have that kind of parentheses shape, the smaller one and the outer ones. One can be a little bit higher or lower than the other one, but they're still kind of all in the same region. You can even just make one little line, little sweep right here if you wanted to. Maybe another one right down here. Sweep, come in a little bit more. I don't really want to make the other one, but it kind of has a nice little shape to that one as well. So it kind of brings in your eye a little bit. You can even have another little curvy line here and there. That's up to you. It kind of gives you a feel for how that would look. You can always add water to your brush if you want to smooth them out a little bit more. Make them blend in just a little bit better, but that's up to you. Just be sure you have a little bit of that rounded shape so it stands out from the straight lines in the background. And again, you can always go back and kind of mess with it before we build our pumpkins on top. And before we build our pumpkins on top, we are going to let our background dry. With our pumpkins, we'll be coming in with our big brush and our white paint, and we're going to be whiting out the areas where our pumpkins are going to sit. So we'll pretty much create 2 pumpkins with white, and then once they're dry, then we can go in there and build the oranges and the blues on top. But take your time, work with your background. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time. Just remember that wet on wet paint blends. You might want to give your paint some time to dry before you build a color on top of it or next to it. But take your time, make sure you like your background before you build anything on top of it. But don't worry too much about it because we're going to be building a lot of pumpkins and words and cotton on top. All right, artists, we'll see you in a bit. All right, artists, for the next part of our painting class, again, be sure your the fence is exactly how you want it in the background. Be sure it's nice and dry and not shiny. You do want to go ahead and wash and dry both of your brushes, get them nice and clean. You can even wrap them around with your paper towel, make sure all the paint is off your two brushes. We are going to use our big brush and our white paint. And remember, we are going to white out the two areas of our pumpkins before we build on top. So for our first pumpkin, it's going to be larger, and our second pumpkin is going to be a little bit smaller, and there's a little bit of space on the bottom where there's no pumpkins, and our harvest is going to be written on top. So just kind of imagine where everything sits on your canvas. So larger pumpkin, smaller pumpkin, a little bit of space on the bottom, and the word harvest written up here. I'm going to take my big brush and my white paint, and you can just watch it first just to kind of get a good idea of spacing. So this is about the halfway point right here, is that right? Make sure, yeah. I'm going to come up a little bit higher than my halfway point. I'm going to curve up the top and diagonal. Okay, my harvest is going to be written up here, so on this top part. I'm going to come down a little bit because I know that's where my stem is going to be, and I'm going to come back up a little bit. So a little bit higher than your halfway point, come up to diagonal and make kind of this wide V shape. For my stem, I'm going to come in a little bit on the left side, come a little bit on the right side. It's like a diagonal shape. So a little bit of a curve here, a little bit of a curve there, and then this is going to be a little diagonal right here, and then harvest will be written right up here. Going to come in on this side, on that side, that wide V and that diagonal line. Then I'm going to come down a little bit past this line. So I'm going to come down, make sure my pumpkin is still pretty round, but past this line right here. I'm going to curve in and bring it in on the other side. Don't go all the way to the bottom, and kind of match up with this one. So again, there's a little bit of space on the bottom, and in just a moment I'll build my other pumpkin. So I have my first pumpkin. A little bit of space, brought it a little bit past this palette right here, but then started coming in and back up. So there is my first pumpkin. Take your time with that one if you're still working, no rush. And this one's definitely a little bit longer. My other one is a little bit more round and wide. Once I was done with that one, I'm going to start my second one. So with my second one, it doesn't go all the way to the right. So I'm going to start a little bit to the right of the center. I'm going to come in, if you just want to watch just a moment. And then again, it doesn't go all the way to the edge. So I'm going to bring it over here. And this one's a little bit wider. It has that U shape. Bring it in just a little bit. And the stem is on the inside, so I do want to kind of create that V that we had a little bit to the left and on top of the other pumpkin, like so. And again, there's a little bit of space down here. The V comes in and overlaps over the other pumpkin. Has a nice apple shape to it right now. And for the stem, same idea. I'm going to go in there and have the stem come in a little bit on the left, a little bit on the right, and then the diagonal top to it. Make sure this is nice and clean down here. This one's stem does kind of come up and over to the left and up and over to the right above the pumpkin. So it almost has that arrow shape, but be sure not to make it too wide. Comes over to the left, down, comes over to the right, over, diagonal. So the stem is wider on the left side and right side. And I can show you that a little bit later when we go in there and paint inside of it. So those are your two basic shapes for your pumpkin. Take your time, and they don't have to look perfect and clean right now. We're gonna go over and paint them. So we outlined them in white, and our paints are dark enough to where I don't feel like we have to go in there and paint the inside white. So all we have to do is just kind of make sure our outline is perfectly set, and then we can just go in there and find those two areas of white. I was gonna white them out first because a lot of times we do, but now looking at it, I feel like we should be okay with the dark oranges and blues that we're working with. Again, take your time with this step, but once you're done, go ahead and wash and dry your brushes. I'm gonna come down a little bit now that I look at that. Sorry, I'm always picking at things, but I'm gonna come down just a little bit lower. I want this one to be a little bit more oval now that I step back and I look at it. So be sure this one's definitely a little bit longer. They pretty much meet up. This one might be just a little bit higher. But once you're done with that, those two basic shapes, go ahead and wash and dry your big brush. No rush at all. Again, you don't have to put white in the centers. I think we should be okay with our dark colors that we're overlapping over them. So wash and dry. Give your white paint some time to dry. So give it a minute or two. Then once you are ready, you are gonna go in there with your orange paint, and be aware of this right one. You don't really wanna get any paint in it. If you accidentally do, it's okay. It's gonna be darker, so it'll go over it. When you're painting your pumpkin orange, you wanna kind of work in that C, backwards C, and then coming down the middle formation. Let me show you how. So big brush, orange paint, and I wanna pretty much cover 99% of my pumpkin with orange. And if you see, I'm kind of curving it around a C shape, or almost like those parenthesis shapes that we made. And that'll just kind of help my pumpkin look a little bit more round. And I don't want to get into the stem because I'll be painting that mostly brown later. But I do want to go over my white line. Be sure it's nice and dry. Nice long brush strokes. Coming down to the left side. A nice orange pumpkin. So there's still a little bit of gray peeking through, that's okay, but we definitely want to cover our pumpkin in orange. You see some white, be sure to drag your brush and go over it. Be sure your white is nice and dry. And on this right side, we're going to be coming in backwards with like the backwards letter C. Get close to that, it's okay. And again, I'm avoiding the stem. I'm doing my best to avoid the other pumpkin. I can even put a line right here to separate the two and then go over it in that shape. But I definitely want to keep that C, kind of more of a backward C shape. And I'm going to come down in the middle more here in just a moment to kind of break those two shapes up. Be more straight in the middle of my pumpkin. More backward C, more C. I want to cover up those white lines so you don't see where I outlined. A nice shape of the pumpkin. And be sure to keep that shape with your brush so it keeps the roundness. C, backwards C and more straight down in the middle. Once I was done, I don't have to clean my brush. I'm just gonna dip it into the brown, so there's still some orange on my brush. Brown, maybe tap some off on your paper towel so there's not too much on there. And with the brown, I'm just gonna sweep some brown on the left side, sweep some brown on the right side, maybe even give your orange a little bit of time to dry, but it's okay if the orange and the brown blend together a little bit. You do want them to kind of work together. You can go down here over this line too. So that brown is going over your white, so you can cover it up a little bit better. So orange, maybe give it a minute or so to dry. Go over it with brown, over the white lines with brown. Also with your brown, you're going to be coming in a little bit and doing a sweep that way, a sweep this way, again coming in a little bit, and then you could even do like a mini sweep in here. So brown, you can even tap some on your paper towel if you feel like you got too much on there. I put a sweep here, a sweep here, sweeped here, and then I came down, rounded with my brush and kind of came more in the middle this way as well. And you don't even have to clean your brush, but you're gonna go into that mustardy yellow and you're gonna sweep some yellow between each little section, kind of keeping that round formation of your brush. So this is pretty much the base of my pumpkin. I'm gonna give it a couple minutes to dry and I'm gonna go back over it with a second coat doing the same thing. So it's pretty much my primer. It's letting me know where I'm gonna set things as well. So in just a moment, I will go back and give this another coat. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I can go in there and paint my stem. So I'm gonna go in there and wash and dry my big brush. Wash and dry your big brush. I'm gonna go into the brown. I'm gonna go over those white lines with my brown paint. You can go ahead and go in there and paint it inside all brown. Be sure to go over those white lines so you don't see them as much. Once you're done with your brown, give it a minute to dry. You go over it with a second coat of brown. So 2 coats of brown. And I do also want you to add a little bit of black to your brush. So there should already be brown on your brush. You did a second coat. Go in there and add a dot of black to your brush and sweep some black in there too to make your brown a little bit darker. Pat some off on there. So you have your brown and your black working together. So you have a pretty dark stem on there. Get that a little bit more figured out. There we go. So brown and black stem. I feel like some of my white is still pretty wet, so I can give it some time to dry. Put a little bit of brown and then go in there and add some black to make it a little bit darker. And I'm just sweeping down with my black. Do want it to be darker. If you put too much black on there, let it dry and then go over with some brown. Like so. right, we'll let this pumpkin sit for a little bit because I feel like it's still shiny, and we'll go on to our second pumpkin. I don't want to do another coat on this one just yet. It just seems too wet, but we'll give it some drying time. And we'll move on to this one. Just be careful of any shiny paint that's still on this one. But I'm going to go in there with my nice clean big brush and my dark blue first. So dark blue big brush. And I'm going to avoid the stem, but I'm going to go over the white with my darker blue. Get that shape. Nice. Excellent. And then same as before, where we go in there with our C, backward C shape. And then just straight lines down the middle. Always drag your brush, drag your brush. So C, backwards C, going straight down the middle. And you don't even have to wash your brush, but I would just pat some off on a nice clean area on your paper towel and go into that lighter blue and add some sweeps of lighter blue to the left, to the right, here and there, just kind of coming down, keeping that rounded shape. Maybe 2 or 3 on the left side, the right side, going over your white line a little bit. Maybe have like a sweep of that lighter blue in the middle. Just adding some lighter areas with your lighter blue. And once you're done, you can just wipe off the blues off your paper onto your paper towel. You don't have to wash it. You can go back to your brown. And just add some sweeps of brown where it might separate. Give your blues maybe a minute to dry, kind of like how we did with our orange pumpkin. Some sweeps on the left, on the right, where the pumpkin kind of tends to cave in a little bit more. If it's having a hard time blending, you can always add some water to your brush, tap it on the paper towel, and then go over it again. So add some bits of brown here and there. So some on the right side, on the left side, I even added some down here. Wipe it off. And then I'm going to go into my yellow just a little bit. So yellow, tap, tap, tap. I can just add some yellow here and there. Again, kind of keeping that same curved motion. You can always add water to your brush. And I did about 2 or 3 on each side. And having a straight one down the middle. So I went from dark blue to light blue to brown to yellow. I'm going to go back and give this another coat too, but I just want to give it some nice drying time. Once you're done, you can wash and dry your big brush. And if you're still working on it, no rush, take your time. And I'm going to go in here and give this 2 coats of brown and then a little bit of black, just like I did on the other stem. So I'm going to go over my white line. If the blue is still pretty wet, you can give it some drying time. Just want to get rid of that white line. I can go in there and paint inside of it. Remember, it overlaps over the pumpkin a little bit. So big brush, brown paint, going over my white line. Do another coat, give it a minute or 2 to dry. And you can add a little bit of black to it to darken it up. Oops. So there's a little bit of brown and black on my brush to kind of darken it up just a little bit. All right. Make sure all that blue and all the brown and black and yellow are off your brush. Go ahead and wash and dry your brush really well. We're gonna go back and give this a nice coat and really finish this one off. So once you're done, again, you're welcome to push pause on the video. Wash and dry your big brush. You're gonna go into your orange and add a lot of orange to your pumpkin. Find those areas of orange that you did before. We pretty much covered the whole thing. I do want you to go back and find those areas of orange and give it a second coat. So everywhere I see orange, I'm going to go in there and sweep to the left, to the right. Just going to find those areas of orange and give it a better coverage. Kind of sweeping and moving my brush. That same round formation. And start down here. Be very careful of your other pumpkin. Over my brown just a little bit too. All right. So without cleaning my brush, I'm gonna go into the brown. So I'll have some brown and orange on my brush. You can even go back to more orange if you need to. So the brown and orange are working on my brush at the same time. Now I'm gonna go find those areas where I did the brown. So on the left side, the bottom, and those areas where it kind of separates. Not separates, but kind of caves in with my brown and my orange. Kind of creating like a paprika brownish orange color. You can go in there and add some more sweeps in there too in each little section. But brown and orange. Be sure you're getting the areas where it kind of caves in on your pumpkin. Be sure you're covering up the white lines. You can go in there and add some sweeps on top here and there. Nice and clean, no bumps. Some more orange and brown on my brush. Adding some bits of orange and brown. Just going in there and defining it a little bit more. And before this dries, I do want to go in there and add a little bit of yellow to my pumpkin as well. So some yellow. You can go in there and add some yellow kind of to the left. Maybe somewhere between each little section. Maybe up here in front. To the right. Right here. Just a little bit of a yellow light in there too. If you want your pumpkin to be a little bit darker, you can always go in there and add, you don't even have to clean your brush. You can add orange and brown together and get your pumpkin a little bit darker too. So if you feel like your pumpkin is still too bright and orange, once you've laid out those colors, let it dry, and then you can go back to more orange and brown and add more in there. So if you feel like you want to darken it up, give it a minute to dry. Yellow, not yellow and orange, but yellow and brown you'll get this paprika color. Then you can go in there and kind of darken it up a little bit. If you want to lighten up your pumpkin, if you feel like it got too dark, you can go back in there and add more of that mustardy yellow in it. So to darken it up, mix some orange and brown. To lighten it up, you can add some yellow to brighten it up. You can go back and forth, kind of mess with your colors on your pumpkin as well. And just remember, wet on wet paint blends. So if you want to give your painting some time to dry before you build your color on top, or if you want, you can always add water to your paint, and that'll help it move a little bit better too. Go in there and add some yellow here and there. You can go back and forth and get it exactly how you want. Once you are done, you can go ahead and wash and dry your brush. We're gonna go back and touch up our stem and finish kind of outlining our pumpkin a little bit. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like. But take your time on your pumpkin, go back and forth as much as you need. Kind of get it the color you want. Remember, you can use your water to smooth it out if you need to. Go back and forth between your colors, get it as dark or as light as you want. Sure everything looks nice and neat. With our stem, remember we had brown and black work on our brush at the same time. So I'm going to go back to brown and a little bit of black. Get some of it off, make sure there's not too much on there. And I'm just going to sweep some brown and black on my brush at the same time. Just working my way down. My brown and black. It goes off to the side a little bit. So big brush, a little bit of brown, a little bit of black. Make sure there's not too much on there. You can always pat some off onto your paper towel. And sweep some down. All right. One last thing on our pumpkin, it is outlined with black and some darker areas of brown black. If you like your pumpkin the way it is, you're welcome to leave it, but there is one last step. Small brush, I'm gonna make sure it's nice and clean. I'm gonna go into my black. Again, if you're working on your pumpkin still, no problem. I'm going to outline around my stem first. Small little sweeps, just kind of working around my pumpkin stem. And remember, the harder you push, the thicker the line is. So you just want to kind of be on the tippy toes. I'm just kind of outlining here and there. Once I'm done, I'm gonna do some sweeps of black, just kind of working on the outside of this pumpkin. Just a little bit of black on my brush, not too much. Mix up pop a little bit from the background. Black, maybe tap some off, and I can even outline with a little bit of black, little sweeps. I'm flicking the end of my brush stroke. Okay. This part be very careful with, because you are going to start working on the inside of your pumpkin. So when I go into the inside, I do want some brown and black on my brush at the same time. Maybe pat a little bit off so you don't have too much on there. But this is going to help me kind of get my shape a little bit better too. So I'm going to go in here on the left side, get a little bit of that black and brown, and sweep down into it. More black and brown, tap it on my paper towel to the right side, get my shape just a little bit better. Black and brown. I'm going to work my way up, maybe a little bit over here to the left. Get that section down. Go in there and fill it up a little bit better too. So I'm just going in there with some brown and black on my brush, getting some of those shapes a little bit back from where my pumpkin kind of caves in. Go back and get this a little bit darker. Definitely want to see where those curves kind of come from, and you can always soften things with water on your brush too. So if you feel like it's ever too harsh, add water to your big brush and just kind of go over it and sweep. It'll smooth it out a little bit more too. So it's kind of rough going in there with brown and black sometimes. That'll definitely get it a little bit softer too. All right. Take your time with this. Again, you can always go back and make it darker, lighter, add more colors. If you wanted to make it that paprika, darker orange, remember you can always go back and add more of that brown, black. Excuse me, more of the orange and black. That'll make it a little bit darker too. It's absolutely up to you. Have a nice pumpkin shape. Excellent. And then kind of mess with mine, get a little bit more I want with my colors. All right, once you're done, you can go ahead and wash and dry your brush, and we can go in there and add another coat on top of our blues. But take your time with this one, get your colors exactly how you like them. Once I was done with this orange, I'm gonna jump to my blue pumpkin. Wash and dry your big brush, be sure it's nice and clean. I'm gonna go back to my dark blue and give it another coat, so get a little bit of a better coverage. Remember, I wanna do the C shape, straight in the middle, and then more of that backward C shape on the right. Without cleaning my brush, I'll jump to that blue again. So the lighter blue, I'm just going over and doing the same thing just so it gets a little bit of better coverage. I can get it down a little bit more, the colors that I like. So light blue, more sweeps of the light blue on the left, the right, straight down the middle. You can add water to your brush, tap on your paper towel, and go over it to smooth it out. And in just a moment, I'll add a little bit of that mustardy yellow on top. Just gonna wipe my blue off here. I don't want a lot of blue, but I'm gonna jump into that mustardy yellow and add some sweeps of yellow in that pumpkin as well, kind of keeping that same idea. Then you can add water to your brush if you need. Once you're done adding the yellow, and if you wanted to add water, tap on your paper towel and go over your blues and your yellow, you can. We're going to go into our stem and then add some more lines into this smaller pumpkin. All right, I'm going to wash and dry this brush. I'm going to go into the brown and a dot of black. And I'm just going to sweep down with my darker brown. Get my stem just a little bit darker. Remember, I'm overlapping on the left side and on the right side, getting that shape a little bit better. Perfect. You can always go back to more brown and black on your brush and sweep in some darker areas, or brown and black. And once you're done, you can wash and dry your brush. So I just kind of went back and gave everything another coat, made sure it was nice and dry, and it covered a little bit better the second time around. Once you're done with that, we're going to kind of do the same idea as we did with this one. We're going to use our small brush, so be sure it's washed and dried. I'm going to add a little bit of black to my small brush, maybe pat some off on my paper towel. On this one, I'm going to have kind of like an oval shape on the top of the stem. So if you wanted to kind of create an oval shape on top of the stem, like so, and then come out to the left a little bit and come out. And this is with black on my small brush. So there's a thin oval shape coming out on either side with my black. Can go back for more if I need to, but not too much. Always tap some off. You can sweep some underneath here as well. So a thin oval with the black, just kind of sweeping here and there, not too solid of a line. Then once I was done, I don't even have to clean my brush, but I'm going to go into the black and brown. I'm going to sweep some black and brown around my pumpkin so I can kind of get the shape back, and I'll add some lines in there too, and I can always soften it up with some water on my brush as well. So this is black and brown. Just adding some sweeps around my pumpkin. Can come in a little bit more on the left side, the right side, and maybe even building some on top. In just a moment, I'll add some water on top. Bring that up just a little bit. Some brown. So the stem just has black on it. The pumpkin has black and brown paint on my small brush. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my big brush, add water, tap, 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 and just kind of go over down here where my black and brown are. So it can kind of help blend in a little bit better with my blues. Maybe kind of give it a little bit more of a flat bottom area of your pumpkin for it to sit on. Go back to my blue and just kind of flatten this out. You can always go back to more blues, more yellows, and just kind of get it exactly where you want your pumpkin to be. And again, be sure to flatten out the bottom of your pumpkin so it's a good place to sit. You can always use water on your brush to make your colors work together a little bit better. You can go back to your blue, your light blue, or your yellow and just kind of work with it a little bit. Just be sure you have that C, backward C, straight line in the middle formation. And again, remember, wet on wet blends. If you need to build on top, give it some time to dry. Take your time, no rush. Go back and forth as you need. Get your pumpkin exactly how you like it. All right, once you're done, go ahead and wash and dry your big brush. Take your time though, no rush on your pumpkins. Once you are done with both of your pumpkins, you are gonna lay a little bit of a yellow-brown light on top of your stem. Let me show you how. So big brush, brown, yellow, pat some off on your paper or just on your paper towel. So just a little bit of brown and yellow at the same time. And mostly on the right side. Let's start on this one because it's a little bit more dry. I'm just gonna add a little bit of light on the right side of my stem. Just little sweeps coming down at a diagonal. More in the middle and the right of my stem. So there's brown and yellow. Tap it on your paper towel a little bit, and it's mostly on the right side of my stem. Same with this one down here. I want the brown and yellow. So just kind of showing where the light hits the stem. Pat on my paper towel a little bit, and then just kind of slowly work in that light on the right side of my stem. Kind of pushing down on it, moving a bit here and there. Move into the middle a little bit more too. I'm gonna go over my stem just a little bit. You can cover it a little bit here and there, but you definitely want your stem not to disappear with the yellow and brown. You can take your time with building your pumpkins. Blending all those colors together might definitely take a while, so no rush. And in just a moment, I'll show you the next step. Our next step will be writing the word harvest on top. We're gonna use our pencil first, just because if we do mess up, if it doesn't look perfect, you can always erase it and go over it, because we will be writing with our small brush and our black paint, and that seems really intimidating. You also do want to make sure that your stem is nice and dry before you paint on top of it. And also be careful not to smear your arm in any wet paint that's down here. What I always do is I always imagine how it's gonna look like before I make it official. So I'm gonna take my pencil and just kind of see where I start and where I end up. So I just kind of place myself exactly where I want my writing to be. And your writing is going to be different than my writing. Everyone's handwriting is going to be different. Just be sure not to poke your pencil through your canvas, and really lay it out for yourself exactly where you want your lettering to be before you make it official. So watch out for wet paint, and I'm going to show you on mine. It might be hard to see with just the pencil lead, but I'm going to do my best to make sure it looks nice and cursive-y. You'll probably be able to see it better as I paint it black. I just wanted to show you how I just kind of moved along my pencil, and it's kind of hard to write big sometimes, but I wanted to make sure I just had a little bit of space on the left and on the right side. So again, I kind of started up here, swirled up and down, came up and down, made my letter A, and then I made my R, the V, just kept that cursive moving. But again, we all have different handwriting. Yours does not have to be like ours. Just make sure that yours fits into the space really nicely. And once you have it down, you're welcome to take your small brush. Be sure it's a little bit wet. Pat it on the paper towel 5 or 6 times. And you're just using your black. You can even turn it this way. Use your elbow a little bit more. Write mine sideways, sorry. And I want to definitely be able to see my pencil line. And keep my brush going until it's out of paint. And you can even do 2 coats of this black paint. But be sure you're moving your brush and not doing choppy short movements. See if I can see that pencil line a little bit better. Make sure that stem is nice and dry. Make sure you spelled harvest correctly. If you feel like harvest is too intimidating, too many letters, you can put fall on there. You can put your family name on there if you can see it fitting pretty okay. Looks like I got a little bit black in there. I'm going to go in there and add some gray to clean it up in just a moment. Before that black inside of that loop dries, I'm going to try to pick it up as much as I can because it's still wet. Not a big deal at all. I can see it a little bit better now. I can go over it. So all I did was get my brush wet, tap on the paper towel, and just pick up some of that wet black paint while it's still dry. But now that I can see it a little bit better, the sun's not in my eye, I'm going to go in there and really clean it up. I would definitely recommend doing it with pencil first and nice long lines. And again, remember, the harder you push on your brush, the thicker the lines become. So you can even have a variation of thick versus thin lines. Take your time with this. Carry that brush over. Don't do choppy short lines. And there is one more step to this painting, or one more section to this painting, which is our cotton. And we're gonna lay kind of the little twig down first, or the wood area, then we'll lay our cotton, and then we'll build on top. But after the writing section, that's gonna be a breeze. Writing is always so intimidating, especially when you go on top of everything with black paint. After all the hard work you've done, you want to make sure it looks nice and neat. Swirl this in just a little bit. Always go over it again and clean it up. But take your time on your handwriting. You don't want to go too fast. You can always work from the outside in. I'm just going to clean up the ends of your letters. Just be sure to barely push down at the end. Kind of bring it in a little bit. So with this one too, I'm just going to barely push down and then bring it in. So I'm going to have a cleaner end to the letter. Again, remember, nice long brush strokes. You can go back for another coat. I like to lean on my elbow a little bit more. Just get a little bit of white on there. It's kind of hard too, sorry, while videotaping. Sorry, my letters are so wobbly. But again, be sure you take your time with those. You're welcome to pause the video at this moment. I'm going to show you the last step to our painting class, which is the cotton. Once you have your lettering done, the next thing you're going to do is take your small brush and wash it and dry it. You're going to mix yourself a dark brown. My plate looks messy. I'm going to maybe scoot this over it a little bit. I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, 4 scoops of the brown with my small brush. I'm going to take 1, 2 scoops of the black. I'm going to stir it to make a nice dark brown. I feel like my black took over a little bit too much, so let me go back in for a little bit more brown. Be sure you have a nice dark brown. You don't want to get too dark too fast though, so if you want to go back to more brown, you definitely can. I think I overloaded my small brush with a little bit too much brown. Excuse me, black. So the nice dark brown, nice chocolatey dark brown. Small brush. Don't get too dark too fast, but you can always go back to more brown. So nice chocolatey brown. If you want it to be darker, add more black. If you want it to be lighter, add more brown. Definitely a nice chocolatey brown. Once my 2 pumpkins were dry, I can let this dry. I'm not going to be anywhere near my harvest writing, so I can kind of work my way down here. But I'm going to lay out the basic shape of my cotton, and then I'm going to build on top. So let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. Nice small brush. Be sure to wipe off the sides so there's no big chunks. I'm going to show you kind of a trick that I use a lot when I'm making long lines, because it can be intimidating. I'm going to come up from the corner left. Let me get a little bit up from the corner left. I'm going to make dashes. I'm going to come down. I'm going to work my way up like so, and I'm going to stop about right there. So I'm almost to the corner. I come up, come down a little bit, and over to the top right corner of my blue pumpkin. Once you're done with making those dashes, then you can connect all of them. By making dashes, that just kind of slows down your hand, and you can kind of concentrate more on the direction that you're going versus just going in there really fast and losing control of your line. So once you're done, use your small brush to connect them. At the end, it does get a little bit straight on the stem, and I can kind of bring it in. So I just have a straight line right here, and I can start bringing it in like so. So you have that up, down, and then back up to the corner. Take your time with that line. Be sure to connect those dashes. Then I'm going to start making the little branches that kind of break off. I'm going to come up a little bit here and curve a little bit up here. And then on top of my blue, I'm going to curve up into a diagonal right here. So I have 2 kind of up into the right, really short lines. This one's a little bit longer than that one, so be sure to kind of curve that one a bit longer. Right to the right of this one, you're going to build this one a little bit taller, and it's going to come up and straight just a little bit, like so. almost like the number 1, but be sure you're barely pushing on your small brush. You don't want to push too hard. And to the right, just a little bit past this, you're going to come down just a little bit to the right and diagonal. And then you're going to come up and to a diagonal like so. You can connect them. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. From this one down here, I'm going to come out a little bit and make a line that kind of curves this way. I'm going to come up a little bit. There's a line that curves this way, but it stays inside the blue pumpkin shape. So I'm going to come up and make this shape right here. So I have this one, I have my mini one, the taller one, the one that also curves up. And then I have my mini one with the middle one, and then another one that curves up, like so. All right, I think that's all my lines that I need for now. Take your time with these. You can go over it to really make it a nice solid. Before it dries, you don't have to clean your brush. You can dip a little bit of into yellow, tap, 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 and just sweep just a little bit of yellow here and there. If it's not blending too much, remember you can just always add a little bit of water on top to make it blend a little bit better. Just gonna sweep it in, but you want a little bit of yellow light. And again, it's my small brush. I didn't wash it at all. I'm just gonna sweep some yellows here and there. If you want, you can add some water, tap, 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 and then go over your yellow to kind of make it blend in with your brown a little bit better. This is a really hard painting that has a lot of blends, so if you are at this point, you have done amazing. Blends can definitely suck you in for hours and hours, so you are doing awesome if you're at this point. There was a lot of going back and forth and doing other coats, a lot of line work, handwriting. We've done all the hard stuff. All right, then go ahead and wash and dry your small brush. We are going to go back to our big brush, but I want to make sure that you've really washed and dried your big brush really well. So go ahead and wash and dry it. Put this pencil to the side. Make sure there's no blues or oranges on top. We are going to be building our cotton on top of the stem. What I'm going to do is do one kind of area at a time, or one thing at a time. So big brush, white paint. And with these, you want to keep the cotton balls nice and round, but I also want to keep my big brush moving. So I want to keep my brush nice and moving. I want my cotton balls to be nice and round shape as well. Almost like a cloud shape. Just to make sure they're nice and round. But keep that brush moving too. And they're coming up from the stem as well. So not nice patchy, kind of round, cloudy shape. Before it dries, I do want to add a little bit of dark blue to my big brush, tap it on the paper towel, and just add a little bit of that darker blue on the bottom side where less sun is hitting it. So I'm just adding a tiny bit of blue, dark blue, tapping it on my brush, and just kind of creating a little bit of a darker blue on the bottom part. I do want to wash and dry my brush because I don't want too much blue on there for my next little patch. So I'm going to wash and dry my big brush. I don't want to do this one just yet because it's going to be going over the brown and my brown is still shiny. So let's skip this mini one. Nice clean big brush. I'm going to create a nice big ball of cotton. Again, I'm just kind of moving it, making sure it looks nice and round, sitting at the end of that line work right there. Looks a little cotton ball, a little cloud. Looks nice and round. Don't go too far out with it. A nice cute shape. Like a nice round brush. Move that brush. Be sure you're not in the same area over and over again. In just a moment, I'll add a little bit of dark blue to my brush and kind of worry about adding dark blue more to the bottom part where less sun is hitting it. So just a little bit of blue, dark blue. A nice round patchy cotton ball. And then I'm going to add dark blue, tap it on my paper towel, then just kind of add a little bit of dark blue to the bottom area. And then I gotta wash and dry once I was done because I don't want too much blue on my next little patch of cotton or ball of cotton. I'm gonna avoid, actually I should be, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go on to the next one, this one to the right. So just be sure you have a nice clean big brush. Go back to your white paint. This one's gonna be a little bit more oval, so I'm gonna work my way up just a little bit. So it's gonna come up just a little bit. Add a little bit of brown on my brush. It's gonna be a little bit longer than the other ones. Come up, round on the sides. Keep that brush moving. They look kind of weird for a moment, but we'll wrap them in just a moment. So I have the white paint down. Kind of has an oval shape. I moved my brush. Dark blue, tap on my paper towel. And I'm going to kind of add a little bit of dark blue on the bottom area. There's less sun hitting it. Wash and dry. I only have 4 more little areas and then I'm almost done. White paint, big brush. This one's a little bit more round, so I'm gonna keep that brush moving. Keep it nice and round. Keep on picking up some other colors on my white paint. Clean it up just a little bit. All right. Move that brush, get this nice round cottony area. Cloud-like. The end. That's down. Alright, so nice round. A little bit of dark blue. Tap it on your paper towel. Then you want to again kind of work down here with your dark blue. And I need a cleaner napkin, obviously. Let me turn mine around because I keep on picking up different colors everywhere. I'm going to add a little bit of this dark blue down here, the bottom part, like so. And then I can wash and dry. Ooh, I have 1, 2, 3. I forgot about this one, this 4th one right here. So wash and dry, white paint. Just kind of working the side of my brush and making this one nice and round as well. And then I'm going all the way up. This round one, making sure it's nicely covered. Nice and round, and then I can add a little bit of dark blue to my brush, tap it on my paper towel, then add a little bit of that dark blue on the bottom. Perfect, like so. Once you're done, wash and dry. Same thing to the other 3. So wash and dry, white paint, big brush, work my brush nice and round. So be sure that they're not running into each other. dark blue, tap, tap, tap. Work on the bottom area of this one as well. I don't really work into the like the middle area too much, right? It's kind of just the bottom area right there. I'm gonna wash and dry my small brush. I'm gonna go into my white paint, and then I have this one down here. So, and then dark blue, tap, 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 go over on the bottom part, like so. Have one more, this one that we skipped because we're waiting for this brown and yellow to dry. So wash and dry. Your big brush, white paint. This one overlaps, make sure it's nice and round, all the way around, like so. And then dark blue, tap, 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 and then I'm going to add some on the bottom. Before I do the last step, I do want these to be really dry. So be sure you have no wet, shiny spots. If you want to go back and make any of the whites a little bit more white, now that it's dry, you can really clean that big brush and go back and add a little bit of white, maybe tap some off on your paper towel so you don't have too much on there. You can really go in there and make some of those cotton balls a little bit brighter. We do kind of see some of the background a little bit here and there, so it doesn't have to be, or it shouldn't be like a solid white, but if you want to go in there and make the white areas a little bit brighter, you can go back and add another coat of white at the ends of each little cotton ball right there. All right. Once you're done, go ahead and wash and dry. Again, be sure your cotton balls are nice and dry for this last step, but we are pretty much holding something that grasps onto each cotton ball, and we're going to use our brown and black mix. If you don't have any more left, it's that same brown and black mix we used earlier for down here. So if you need to make more, just be sure the color is similar. Small brush only, and I'm going to show you an example of one, and then I'll just kind of keep moving along on all the other ones. So brown and black mix, small brush. I'm going to go underneath and go to the left of this and to the right of this, so it's kind of holding on. I don't want to really go too much past halfway. I'm just kind of going halfway up. On the left side, I curve around it. On the right side, make sure there's not too much in my brush. And then I can bring another one in where I'm sweeping to the left and I'm sweeping to the right. So it holds my cotton ball, and I can bring it down to where it is working with the rest of my stem a little bit better too. Again, it's kind of holding on to the left and to the right. Make sure your lines have a little bit of a curve to them. It always helps, makes it look more natural. So this one here on the bottom, same idea. I'm going to work off this branch right here, to the left, to the right. Looks like my white is still a little bit wet, so I would definitely give it some more drying time. I'll go back to it too, but then I kind of built that V shape that works in the middle. But again, it still looks pretty wet, so I would usually give it some more time to dry before I went on top of it. This one right here, I want to go underneath it, so right, it's holding it. I don't want to see any of that white poking through on the bottom. I'm going to go to the left of it. You can even come out a little bit here and there too. Again, I was being impatient, so I would usually let it dry to where it's not mixing in with the white as much. But all you're doing is that same idea of it holding your cotton ball. You can even come out on the left and right side a little bit if you want to be a little bit fancy. And then it's almost like the shape of a V that's going there as well. And you can flick at the end of your brush stroke. Again, be sure you're using your brown and black mix. I'll just do them all in mine. And while you're waiting for yours to dry, you can kind of see the example over and over again. And again, be sure each one has kind of like a little bit of a curve to it. They don't all look exactly the same. You want them to kind of be going in different directions, the direction that the cotton ball is growing. Keep on getting some white on mine, sorry. So small brush, brown and black. I'm working to the left. I'm working to the right. I'm kind of coming in, oh, I'll come in this way and this way. There is a lot of space here on my pumpkin, so if you want, you can just kind of build a little bit of a brown curving down, so you have a little bit of a filler down here, so it's almost like a little bit of a curve right here. Work my way up here and up there, and then I'll go to the right, like so. Then small brush, another where it's holding down here to the left, and a little bit of a curve this way and this way. Bring it in a little bit more. Be sure to kind of soften this area. If it looks very harsh, you can always kind of bring it in towards the stem, a little bit of a curve this way and this way. Same with all of the other ones. You can always bring it in a little bit more so it softens up the look. It doesn't look so harsh as it's breaking off. And I will be adding a little bit of yellow to this too. So just kind of like how we did before. We're going to add a little bit of yellow for light. For this one, I'm going to even add a little bit in the middle right here too, just to kind of break it up a little bit. So above, below, I made that V, but I just kind of came in and did another one just to make it its own a little bit. Always go back once it's dry and give it another coat. But each little area is holding the cotton ball. Looks really pretty. Let it dry for a little bit if you need to go back with another coat of that brown and black mix. But also you do want to go over it with a little bit of yellow. Maybe tap some off on your paper towel. I'm just going to sweep some on those areas that we just did. Just sweep some here and there. Very random. And if it's not blending in too well with your brown and black mix, just like we did before, you can add some water, tap it on your paper towel, and go over it to kind of smooth it out. But take your time with this. You did a lot of hard work. That was a lot of blending in the background with your pumpkins. You did your letter writing, and then you did a lot of textures with your cotton balls. It's definitely a painting that can be difficult, so don't feel like you have to rush at any point. Go back and make any touch-ups if you need to. Just remember wet on wet paint blends. And so sometimes you just have to wait for things to dry before you move on. But otherwise, your lovely harvest painting is done. Thank you so much, amazing artists, for joining us, and hopefully we will see you soon.